Secretary Noem is a liar with no concern for the lives of Americans killed by the department she runs. I hope my Republican colleagues will remember that our job is to conduct oversight, not cover for Donald Trump and his out-of-control administration, which is running roughshod over Americans' rights, killing U.S. citizens and threatening our very democracy. The disease rotting the Trump administration from the inside out started at the top and has infected every part of the executive branch. Nowhere is that more evident than at the Department of Homeland Security. This hearing is just the start of a reckoning for the Trump administration and its weaponization of DHS against American citizens and the principle our country stands for. DHS, led by Secretary Kristi Noem, must be held accountable for its lawlessness immigration operation. They are reckless, creating chaos in our communities, terrorizing adults and children alike, and undermining our moral authority as a nation of liberty and rule of law. Last month, an ICE agent shot and killed Renee Good, a Minneapolis mom, in cold blood as she drove away from him. After killing her, the agent called her a disgusting name I won't repeat here. Other agents refused to allow a nearby physician to treat her. Democrats called for accountability. Instead, Secretary Noem blamed the victim, Ms. Good, and attempted to gaslight Americans with false claims that Ms. Good was a domestic terrorist. Renee Good was nothing of the sort. She was a mom, a wife, a neighbor, and an American citizen who did not deserve to die at the hands of her own government. She should be alive today. Ever since, the Trump administration has devoted the full resources of the federal government to blocking a legitimate investigation into Ms. Good's killing. If that isn't a sign of guilt, I don't know what is. Federal prosecutors had a warrant to collect evidence from Ms. Good's vehicle for a civil rights investigation into ICE's use of force, but FBI Director Kash Patel and other Trump administration officials demanded they drop it. Career prosecutors, duly bound to the rule of law, not the political prerogatives of the White House, resigned in protest. Blocking an investigation into the government's use of force against one of its own citizens is a self-dictatorship, not democracies. Every American should be outraged. Democrats tried to get answers in the aftermath of Ms. Good's shooting. We called on Acting Director Todd Lyons to testify at the committee's hearing 3 weeks ago. Unfortunately, he turned down the committee's invitation. This is part of a pattern of the Trump administration's refusal to comply with regular congressional oversight. Committee Democrats have sent multiple letters to ICE and CBP on critical issues, but most of them, 10, have gone unanswered, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to include all 10 of these letters into the record.
Without objection.
ICE has blocked members of Congress from visiting its detention facilities, even after reports of horrific conditions, detainee abuse, and a detainee being murdered in a DHS facility. I was one of those individuals who parted to a lawsuit to try to get ICE to just follow the law that says members of Congress can visit ICE facilities and present themselves at any time. So I understand that it's still being litigated, but I've been given authority to go, and I plan to do it this week just to test ICE's adherence to the law. Mr. Lyons is here today, nearly a month after we invited him. I guess DHS needed time to get his story straight before he came to testify under oath. Fearing more violence from federal law enforcement, Democrats have also called on DHS to rein in immigration agents and their brutal attacks on Americans immediately following Ms. Good's murder. But DHS ignored our pleas. Instead, Greg Vino, who styled himself in Nazi attire and takes joy in deploying tear gas at Americans, continued to roam around Minneapolis with his mass gang, terrorizing people and violating their constitutional rights. And tragically, our worst fears were realized. Just days after the hearing, Mr. Lyons refused to participate in. CBP personnel shot Alex Preety, and he was face down on Minneapolis' sidewalk, killing him in broad daylight. In the video of the incident, a DHS agent can be seen cheering Mr. Preedy's death. Americans watched the video in horror. Yet once again, Secretary Noem gaslit the public, made up a demonstrably false story about Mr. Preedy and blamed the victim for his own death. Mr. Preedy was a law-abiding U.S. citizen and a VA nurse who dedicated his career to caring for our veterans. Mr. Chairman, at our last month hearing, I asked for a moment of silence in the memory of Renee Good. Today, with great sadness about another American killed at the hands of DHS, I ask that the committee observe a moment of silence in honor of Alex Preedy. Thank you. The slaying of Ms. Good and Mr. Preedy by DHS are the most tragic examples of what is wrong with Trump's DHS, but far from the only ones. Last fall, a Border Patrol agent shot Miramar Martinez, a U.S. citizen and preschool teacher from Chicago, 5 times. The agent bragged in text messages about shooting her, saying, quote, "I fired 5 rounds and she had 7 holes, but that in your book, boys." Again, the Trump administration tried to blame Ms. Martinez, the victim, but prosecutors dropped charges against her when it became apparent that the evidence contradicted the Border Patrol's phony account. Unlike Ms. Good's and Mr. Preedy's, we can no longer tell their stories. Ms. Martinez has shared her story about what Trump's DHS did to her. I want to play a bit of the video here because people need to see what ICE and CBP are doing to Americans.
So this is the first one I realized. I was like, oh, it's just a pepper pellet, but no. And then I got shot right here. And then I have a wound on the side of my chest right here. And then I got 2 holes in my thigh. And then right here.
Wow.
Right here.
Wow. You're covered in wounds.
Wounds, yeah. And I want people to see like what's going on, like the type of stuff they're doing.
What happened to Ms. Martinez, Ms. Good, and Mr. Preedy is a scourge on this country and shameful chapter in our nation's history, but tragically, there's more. DHS agents recently used a 5-year-old Ecuadorian boy, Lehman Ramos, as bait to lure his family members outside their home to arrest them. The family had entered the country legally as asylum seekers and were living in Minnesota while awaiting their immigration proceedings. DHS sent the little boy and his father to detention in Texas for over a week. Thankfully, a judge ordered him released, slamming DHS for its, and I quote, incompetently implemented deportation campaign. Incompetently implemented deportation campaign is putting it nicely, especially as it relates to small children. More apt in the Bible, quote from John 11, chapter 35th, referenced at the end of the judge's opinion, Jesus wept. DHS personnel are now forcing their way into private homes without a judicial warrant in violation of the 4th Amendment. In one recent incident, ICE dragged a U.S. citizen from his home at gunpoint in underwear before realizing they had picked up the wrong person. The person ICE was actually looking for was sitting in jail in Minnesota. The Minnesota Department of Corrections says that ICE had this information all along. Bystander videos from Minneapolis and cities around the country show ICE and CBP personnel behaving like unprofessional goons, cursing at bystanders and mooning people from their hotel rooms. News reports have a Border Patrol agent was found passed out, drunk, and covered in vomit in a vehicle. And ICE personnel apparently stole a child's phone and sold it for cash. It's an embarrassment, and DHS's so-called leadership should be ashamed, if only they had any shame. Secretary Noem, Department of Homeland Security, has the blood of American citizens on its hand, but she takes no responsibility for anything. To the contrary, Secretary Noem was last seen in this committee room hiding behind her family in a desperate attempt to distract from her department's failures and abuses. Then she ran from our questions, leaving early under the guise of needing to attend a meeting that it turns out didn't even exist. Her inexcusable behavior should come as no surprise. She's always been more concerned with photo ops and wardrobe changes than following the law and fulfilling the mission of her department. Since being sworn in, Secretary Noem has enriched herself, abused the power of her office, obstructed congressional oversight, and violated her oath to the Constitution. Donald Trump and Kristi Noem are doing real damage to this country and to the department that was stood up 25 years ago in the wake of 9/11 to protect American citizens from future attacks. Secretary Noem is a liar with no concern for the lives of Americans killed by the department she runs. She must go. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The chamber fell into a heavy silence after those final words. She must go. Congressman Bennie Thompson did not whisper them. He did not temper them. He delivered them as a conclusion drawn from months of escalating tension, allegations, and tragedy. In that moment, the hearing ceased to be a procedural exchange and became a referendum on leadership at the highest levels of the Department of Homeland Security. What unfolded in his remarks was not simply partisan frustration, it was a sweeping indictment of executive power exercised without restraint. Thompson framed the issue not as policy disagreement, but as a collapse of oversight, accountability, and constitutional fidelity. He accused the administration of running roughshod over Americans' rights. He described a department once formed in the shadow of September 11th to safeguard the nation, now entangled in accusations of chaos, misconduct, and disregard for the rule of law. The names he invoked, Renee Good, Alex Pitti, Mar Martinez, were not statistics in a report. They were citizens, neighbors, professionals, Americans. Thompson recounted the fatal encounters and the aftermath, alleging that federal officials blocked investigations, resisted oversight, and shifted blame onto the very individuals who had lost their lives. He described prosecutors resigning in protest. He pointed to warrants allegedly halted. He painted a picture of federal authority closing ranks rather than opening records.
Whether one agrees with every characterization or not, the gravity of the charges cannot be ignored. When a member of Congress stands in an oversight hearing and claims that investigations were obstructed and constitutional protections disregarded, that is not ordinary political theater. It is a direct challenge to the integrity of governance itself. The Constitution grants Congress the power and the duty to oversee the executive branch. That duty is not optional. It is not conditional on party alignment. Oversight exists precisely because power, unchecked, can drift beyond its intended limits. Thompson's speech was a reminder that hearings are not mere formalities. They are mechanisms of accountability designed to ensure that agencies wield authority within the bounds of law. At the center of this confrontation stands Secretary Kristi Noem. Thompson accused her of evading questions, obstructing oversight, and failing to accept responsibility. He portrayed a department more focused on optics than on adherence to constitutional principles. His call for her resignation was framed not as political revenge, but as a necessary corrective. A step, in his view, toward restoring credibility to a department he argued has strayed from its founding mission. The broader implications stretch far beyond one official. They touch on the fragile balance between enforcement and liberty. Homeland Security was established to protect the nation from external threats, but its mandate has always been bounded by constitutional rights. The Fourth Amendment, due process, equal protection under the law. These are not obstacles to enforcement. They are the foundation upon which legitimate enforcement rests. Thompson's remarks suggest that he believes that foundation is cracking. He referenced blocked facility visits, unanswered letters, and testimony delayed. He cited bystander videos and public outrage. He spoke of communities shaken by federal presence and families seeking answers. In his telling, this was not isolated misconduct. It was systemic failure. Critics will argue that such rhetoric inflames divisions. Supporters will say it reflects justified alarm. But beneath the partisan clash lies a deeper question. When serious allegations arise about federal use of force, transparency is not a luxury. It is a necessity. When investigations are perceived as obstructed, trust erodes. And when trust erodes, the legitimacy of institutions begins to fray. America's system was built on checks and balances precisely because no branch can be trusted with unchecked power. Presidents appoint, agencies enforce, but Congress investigates and the public watches. That dynamic is not a flaw in the system. It is the system. As the hearing concluded, the emotional weight lingered. A moment of silence had been observed, names had been spoken, accusations had been leveled, and a cabinet secretary had been called to resign. These are not small events in the life of a democracy. They are signals that the tension between authority and accountability has reached a boiling point. History will determine which claims withstand scrutiny and which fall apart under evidence. But one truth remains. Democratic governance demands transparency. It demands accountability. And it demands leaders who understand that power is not ownership. It is stewardship. The Department of Homeland Security was created to defend the nation. Its legitimacy depends not only on strength, but on integrity. When lawmakers raise alarms about its direction, the country must pay attention, not with reflexive partisanship, but with sober reflection. Because in the end, this is not about one hearing, one speech, or one official. It is about whether the principles enshrined in the Constitution still guide those entrusted with the authority of the federal government. It is about whether oversight remains meaningful. It is about whether accountability still matters. Moments like this test the resilience of American democracy. They test whether institutions can withstand scrutiny and reform themselves when necessary. And they remind us that vigilance is not optional. It is the price of liberty. Stay informed, stay engaged. And if you believe in transparency, in oversight, and in holding power accountable, subscribe to Liberty Report USA. Support our work to expose the truth.